When President Ibrahim Traore decided to take an unusual route through an old cemetery, his guards thought he was just being curious. But that decision led to meeting a little girl who would change his life and his government forever. What did he see in her, and how did she become his greatest weapon against betrayal? Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now, back to the video. What drives a president to stop his convoy for a young girl sitting by a grave in a forgotten cemetery? It was a rainy afternoon when President Ibrahim Traore's motorcade passed through a nearly abandoned part of town. The cemetery wasn't on their planned route. This was supposed to be a quiet trip to avoid attention. But as the convoy moved through the desolate area, a figure caught his eye. A small girl, alone, sitting in the mud next to a gravestone. Her clothes drenched from the rain, her eyes hollow. Against the hushed murmurs of his security team, President Traore gave the order to stop. What could have compelled him to take such a risk? That girl was divine. At just 9 years old, she had already endured the kind of pain that leaves scars you can't see. After losing both her parents in a horrific fire that consumed their humble home, she was left utterly alone, with no extended family and a system unequipped to care for her. Divine did the only thing she could. She stayed by her parents' grave. Days turned to weeks as she survived on scraps of food left behind by visitors and rainwater collected in rusting cans. Her once bright eyes now mirrored the dark nights she spent shivering, clutching the gravestone that bore her parents' names. Hers was a life so heavy with silence that even her own cries for help had become quiet whispers. When the president approached her that day, it was as though the storm outside had paused. His guards exchanged wary glances, unsure how to handle the situation. This wasn't protocol, but something in the president's demeanor made them stand back. "Who are you waiting for?" he asked her softly. Her reply, while barely audible, was haunting. "No one comes." There was a weight in Divine's answer that cut through the formalities of leadership and rank. She wasn't crying, she wasn't begging, she was just there, in her pain. And that's what struck him. Divine's courage wasn't loud or forceful, it was in the way she continued to exist in the face of unimaginable loss. That day, President Traore made the decision that would alter both of their lives. He insisted on bringing her back with him. The guards loaded Divine into one of the vehicles, an act that surprised and puzzled the entire team. But the president didn't explain. He didn't need to. Once inside the palace, Divine experienced something entirely foreign to her: warmth. A clean room was prepared, complete with a bed that felt strange under her small frame. She was greeted with plates of steaming food, though she only picked at them at first, unsure if it was truly hers to eat. For a child used to sleeping on dirt and scavenging for scraps under moonlight, the adjustment wasn't instant. When she took her first bath, the palace staff had to coax her into the warm water, as though the comfort itself seemed too fragile to trust. This story goes beyond a single compassionate act. Leadership isn't just measured in policies and speeches. One UNICEF study showed that acts of compassion from figures of authority can ripple outward, creating not only individual but systemic change. By embracing kindness in a moment when it would have been easy to look away, the president created a foundation that would later transform his government. Slowly but surely, Divine's presence began to grow in confidence. The child who once clung to solitude started asking quiet questions about the world around her. She listened more than she spoke, but her eyes were always watching, always taking in the details. The president's choice to bring her in wasn't just about shielding her from the dangers outside. It became clear to him that her sharp mind, honed by survival, carried a strength that even seasoned advisors lacked. From sleeping on cold gravestones to embracing the warmth of a palace bed, Divine's life had been given a second chance. Yet this wasn't just the story of a girl being saved. It was the beginning of a connection that would redefine the meaning of trust, compassion, and leadership. But what happens when someone this observant begins noticing cracks that even those in power fail to see? Why would a young girl question the president's decision-making process in his own palace? For Divine, curiosity wasn't a choice. It was her way of understanding a world that still felt unfamiliar. Adjusting to palace life had not been easy for her. Though she had food and shelter, she often found herself sitting in corners, quietly watching how everything worked. The grand halls and polished marble floors may have been a universe apart from the cemetery, but her instinct for survival, always observing, always listening, remained sharp. She paid particular attention to the president. From her place near the edge of the room during meetings or beside him in quieter moments, Divine noticed the small things others overlooked. She saw the steady flow of documents and files handed to him throughout the day. What stood out most, though, was how quickly he signed each paper, sometimes without a second glance. Her young mind couldn't make sense of it. How could a man responsible for an entire nation sign something so blindly? It wasn't long before her thoughts turned into action. One evening, catching the president in the office while the staff was away, Divine sat on the arm of his chair and asked plainly, "Papa, why don't you read the papers before signing them?" He chuckled, brushing it off at first, suggesting that her concern must have come from cartoons or stories. But her expression stayed serious. She went on to explain that her teacher, before the fire, told her over and over again the importance of reading what someone puts in front of you. The president's smile faded, replaced by a glance at the stack of papers on his desk. At first, her question seemed innocent enough, just the musings of a curious child, but it lingered in his mind, and as he sat alone later that night, her voice repeated in his memory. For years, he had trusted his staff implicitly, believing that each document handed to him was prepared with care. His advisors had assured him that the process was streamlined to save time, to focus on more pressing matters. And yet there it was, a small voice planting the idea that this trust might have blinded him to something deeper. The doubt Divine sparked grew into a decision. The next morning, President Traore asked for files chosen at random from recent weeks, intending to review them himself. It didn't take long before something alarming surfaced. Among dozens of standard forms, one document stood out, a project approval stamped with his signature but detailing a non-existent development initiative. The project, tied to a private company, authorized the release of 3 billion CFA francs for work that would never happen. Fraud. And worse, it carried his name. As fury and disbelief burned through him, he recognized the betrayal in front of him. This forged document wasn't just an act of corruption, it was a stain on his leadership. The very process he trusted to protect his people had allowed this theft to happen under his watch. Furious, Traore launched an immediate investigation into every document from the last 3 months. The results exposed not just one incident, but a pattern. Millions of stolen funds, fake names, and false signatures. It was a coordinated effort among individuals he had placed his trust in. "I take full responsibility for trusting too much and reading too little," he admitted publicly after the investigations. In that same statement, he credited Divine for opening his eyes, saying her question had been the reason this truth came to light. Divine's question not only uncovered corruption, but reshaped the president's leadership style. He committed to personal diligence, ensuring he would read every document before signing. It also taught him to listen to unexpected voices, realizing that wisdom and insight don't always come from those with titles. Yet, as transformative as it was, her question did not come without consequence. What happens when shaking the foundations of power starts to disrupt the delicate balance within the palace? When someone tries to silence a young girl for uncovering the truth, how does she fight back? After exposing the fraudulent activities buried in official documents, Divine found herself in an unfamiliar position, not just as a quiet observer, but as a catalyst for change. Her presence brought a certain unease to the palace. Corrupt officials, those who had spent years comfortably profiting from their schemes, began to feel the walls closing in. Transparency became the new rule, and for them, Divine was the face of this unwanted reform. Rumors began to spread through the palace halls. Some claimed she was just a naive child meddling in things too big for her. Others took it further, whispering that she was a ghost, sent from the graveyard to wreak havoc. Among her most vocal detractors, one comment became common: "She's a problem. She's just a child. What does she even know? She's blocking us from collecting money." The resentment ran deep, and before long, it turned dangerous. The first real threat came in the form of poisoned tea. Divine had recently taken it upon herself to bring tea to the president during his long meetings, a quiet routine that symbolized her growing sense of responsibility. But 2 strangers, hired by unnamed but familiar sources within the palace, planned to use this against her. Their goal was simple: poison the tea she carried, ensuring both Divine and her connection to the president would disappear. This was no idle rumor. When the plot was discovered, detailed instructions about her habits made it clear how closely she was being watched. The president reacted immediately. Security around Divine was increased, and the usual trust he extended within his team started to erode. This little girl has faced more attacks than most grown men, but she stands strong, he said later in a public address. His words, while powerful, did not erase the fear in the days following the discovery of the plot. Divine, though a child, understood now that her presence wasn't just inconvenient, it was threatening enough to warrant deadly measures. Attempts to undermine her credibility didn't stop there. Rumors shifted from her being a child to something stranger. The imagery of her origins in a cemetery fueled accusations that she was a ghost child, someone born of death and sent to disrupt order. These whispers weren't just confined to private conversations. They reached the ears of palace staff and external officials, growing louder, more ridiculous with time. Still, Divine stood firm. While others might have folded under such pressure, she continued to move quietly, bringing the same focus and calm that had once helped her survive on the cemetery grounds. But whispers weren't the only threat. The betrayal that cut deepest came from Emmanuel, the president's childhood friend. Emmanuel had been close to Ibrahim for years, a figure of trust whose roots ran deeper than political relations. Yet, Emmanuel's resentment of Divine grew alongside her increasing role in the palace. His frustration over losing the unchecked privileges he once enjoyed turned into open bitterness. Before she came, I was signing contracts and getting paid well, he admitted later. Now, nothing. All my files go back with questions. Caught in his jealousy and anger, Emmanuel's actions became unpredictable. When the betrayal surfaced, the president's reaction wasn't immediate fury, but heartbreak. "I already regret letting you in," he said, his voice heavy with disappointment. This wasn't just a betrayal of trust, it was personal. For Ibrahim, the line between political and emotional loyalty had been crossed, and repairing it wasn't an option. And despite these challenges, the president's public support for Divine never wavered. During a televised address, he spoke directly to the accusations and the threats that had been made against her. "She is not a ghost. She is not a spy. She is a child with a heart of gold, and I will protect her like my own." These words sent a clear message to the forces working against her. She wasn't going anywhere, no matter what lies they spread or what plots they devised. While others may have broken under such pressure, Divine only grew stronger. Through betrayal, threats, and isolation, she became more than an advisor. She became a symbol. Yet, with every betrayal, the question remained, how does someone like Divine rebuild trust after being tested time and again? Divine's journey from a forgotten orphan by a grave to a trusted voice in the president's palace is a testament to strength born from hardship. Her quiet courage turned her into a force that helped dismantle corruption and strengthen the very systems that once overlooked her. It reminds us that resilience can bloom in the unlikeliest conditions. An ordinary child reshaped a nation. Sometimes the smallest voices hold the greatest truths, but those truths are only heard when we choose to listen. How many more untold stories like Divine's wait in the shadows, ready to inspire change when someone finally pays attention?